Let me begin today just by starting to read Romans chapter 2, verse 17. I'll read down through verse 29. But if you call yourself a Jew and rely on the law and boast in God and know His will and approve what is excellent because you are instructed from the law, and if you are sure that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of children, having in the law the embodiment of knowledge and truth, you then who teach others, do you not teach yourself? While you preach against stealing, do you steal? You who say that one must not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law dishonor God by breaking the law. For as it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. For circumcision indeed is of value if you obey the law, but if you break the law, your circumcision becomes uncircumcision. So, if a man who is uncircumcised keeps the precepts of the law, will not his uncircumcision be regarded as circumcision? Then he who is physically uncircumcised but keeps the law will condemn you who have the written code and circumcision, but break the law. For no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward and physical, but a Jew is one inwardly. And circumcision is a matter of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter. His praise is not from man, but from God. Father, once again, we come to this word and ask for your guidance and teaching and protection as we think through it today and learn from it. Amen. Well, the Apostle Paul, he's really winning a lot of friends today, isn't he? Now we know why he established in the first verse that he's an official messenger from God. And in other places in the New Testament, you will remember that the apostle lays out his credentials to people to try to establish who he is. But when he says something like, for no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, oh, that fires some people up. That really fires some people up. Now, this is consistent with the Old Testament and then what Jesus taught in the New Testament and the other apostles. But salvation, relationship with God, is a heart matter. It's not a matter of ritual. It's not a matter of externalities. It's a matter of the heart, and that was taught all the way through the Scriptures. The prophets had a lot to say about that. And Paul is highlighting that and echoing it. So what is Paul up to here at this point? Well, he is trying to establish that every person, Jew and Gentile, need the gospel. Everyone must have the gospel of Jesus Christ, and there are no exceptions. Everyone must have that if they are going to have eternal life, if they're going to be in right relationship with God. And so that's what he is after. We've already seen that he describes Gentile behavior. Not that the Jewish people wouldn't have some of that in their own nation, but he was addressing Gentile people there primarily in Romans chapter 1, not exclusively, but primarily. But he knows that as he does that, as he says to the Gentile, you're under the judgment of God, you're a sinner, you have worked against God and all of those things, that the Jew is over here and saying, yes, you're right. Yeah, I agree with you, man. I agree with you. Look at those sinners. Aren't they from all over the world? I agree with you. And then the apostle says, now, I'm going to get to you. Now, as far as you're concerned, you're a sinner too. And you're facing the judgment of God as well. Wait a minute. What? What are you saying? No, Paul. And that's why Paul has to be rather intricate in his argument, his logic in his argument here. What he's establishing is everyone is guilty before God. We've already thought about that. We've already seen it, a little bit of it. But he knows he has an extra measure to go with the Jewish people because he's a Jew. And the Jews have a special relationship with God. He recognizes that. And the rabbis and the religious leaders and the people of the nation of Israel know that as well. And he knows it's going to take a little extra effort here to really call them out and to establish that they are not in good standing with God. And so that's what he's up to. Now, this idea of the heart condition of the individual, as I've said, was taught thoroughly through the Old Testament and into the New Testament. But it might do us well just to go to Psalm 50 and just get a picture of what's happening in the life of Israel and God's attitude towards the people of Israel. If we look at Psalm 50, we'll see something very interesting. And if you let your eyes flow down to verse 7. Psalm 50, verse 7. This really summarizes, I'm just presenting this to you, it kind of summarizes what the prophets, you find it in Jeremiah and find it in Isaiah and other places. Hear, O my people, and I will speak. O Israel, I will testify against you. I am God, your God. Not for your sacrifices do I rebuke you. Your burnt offerings are continually before me. I will not accept a bull from your house or goats from your folds. For every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds of the hills, and all that moves in the field is mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and its fullness are mine. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving and perform your vows to the Most High and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you and you shall glorify me. But to the wicked God says, what right do you have to recite my statutes or take my covenant on your lips? For you hate discipline, and you cast my words behind you. If you see a thief, you are pleased with him, and you keep company with adulterers. You give your mouth free rein for evil, and your tongue frames deceit. You sit and speak against your brother. You slander your own mother's son. These things you have done, and I have been silent. You thought that I was one like yourself. But now I rebuke you and lay the charge before you. Mark this then, you who forget God, lest I tear you apart and there be none to deliver. The one who offers thanksgiving as his sacrifice glorifies me. The one who orders his way rightly, I will show the salvation of God. The one who orders his way rightly, orders his way, the one who lives rightly. That's heart condition. That's heart stuff. So this is a summary that helps us to just understand. I want you to understand, Paul's not bringing anything new to the picture here. There is something he's bringing that is new and quite a shock to the Jews, but this idea that the heart matters to God more than the externals is not something new. Although by the first century there was a lot of reliance on the externals, and that's a big problem. Now, before we get further into the message, there's a couple things that I wanted to bring to your attention. Paul talks about, he begins this section, but if you call yourself a Jew, and he himself is a Jew, Jesus is a Jew, Peter is a Jew, Matthew is a Jew, but he's condemning them here. He's presenting the case that you think you're so good and you're so righteous before God. Well, as a matter of fact, the Gentile stands, it has more standing than you do, and the Gentile one day will rebuke you. Their life will rebuke. God is the only judge. The Gentiles won't judge the Jews. God will do that. But the way they conduct themselves by obeying the natural law, well, that stands in stark contrast to what the Jews themselves are doing. But what I want to alert you to at this point, this kind of language that Paul is using. For no one is a Jew who is merely one outward, and so on. That has led some to think, well, Paul must be an anti-Semite. He must not like the Jews any longer. He's a Jew himself, but he's pretty harsh on the Jews. Well, Jesus himself was harsh on the Jews, but that kind of language comes along here. And what I want you to know is that nowhere in the New Testament, nowhere in the Apostle Paul, nowhere in the Bible is anti-Semitism endorsed. Paul is against something. Paul is not anti-Jew. He is anti-natural man. The natural condition of the heart, the person that is not oriented towards God, he is anti that. Paul is anti-Judaism. Now hear me, the way Judaism was practiced in the first century. God gave the law to His people, and it had been corrupted, and He's anti that. He's not anti the people, okay? That's very important for you to grasp and have a hold of. The Apostle Paul has a deep love for the Jews. He refers to them as his kinsmen according to the flesh. We'll see in Romans chapter 9, 10, and 11 how deep his love really is for his kinsmen. So, I'm wanting to establish with you, I think I have, that the Apostle Paul loves his kinsmen. He is violently, not violently in a physical way, in a rhetorical way, he is against the corruption that is endorsed and is promoted and is taking place in the religion of the Jews. So Paul loves the Jews, and he's quite willing to critique the Jews. He's quite willing to condemn the Jews in their standing before God, in their relationship before God. That rebuke, that critique does not mean he hates the people. I want you to have that and cling to that and know that, or otherwise we will get into all kinds of misunderstandings about the Apostle Paul. Why mention it? Well, you likely are aware that there is a rise of hatred against the Jews in this country. It's been there for quite some time on the left. It is there on the right today. It's rising. It's on both sides. On this topic, neither side takes the high ground. Both are in the gutter. So, as Bible students, as Bible-believing Christians, we want to be firmly grounded in the apostles, and particularly the Apostle Paul is not anti-Jew. He does not shrink from critiquing the Jews when he believes they are out of line concerning their relationship with God. And that indicates that there is appropriate behavior being demonstrated by the Apostle Paul towards these chosen people of God. Okay? Bringing that up to you, you're going to need to be very careful. Once again, like in the other messages, you're going to need to be very, very careful on this one. Be very careful. You will not escape this one. Make sure you have a right understanding of what the Bible teaches. All right. What Paul is opposed to here with these people in the first century, they have a misplaced confidence in who they are as Jews. They've been chosen by God. They've had difficulties even surviving, and they're proud that they do survive. And so Paul's coming at them, and he says some things that are hard for them to understand, hard for them to grasp and to get a hold of. But we want to keep in our mind, as I've already highlighted to you, he's going somewhere. He's going to chapter 3. No one is righteous before God, including you Jews are not righteous before God. Your confidence is in your flesh. Your confidence is not in the grace of God. Your confidence in looking at yourself is you think you're a pretty special person. And Paul says, no, God is a pretty special person. He chose you because of nothing worthy in you. He made you into something. But by the first century, that had gotten flipped up and it's on its head. So, the apostle says that some things need to change. There's the scriptural background, and I just briefly directed you there to Psalm chapter 50. We could look at Isaiah 1 or Jeremiah 7, Hosea 6, Micah 6, and the rest of them. I included those references in your listening guide. Obedience is the issue. And the background is that there should be obedience from God's people with a thankful, faithful, and merciful heart, not out of mindless ritual, not out of ancestry or heritage or ethnicity or legalism or religious arrogance. There needs to be obedience, and that's why Paul can use such language as when he says, "You then who teach others," verse 21, "do you teach yourself?" What he's saying is, you're a hypocrite. You're so confident, verse 19, you're confident in yourself that you're a guide to the people that are blind. You think the Gentiles are blind. Okay, they don't know God. Yes, they are. Agreed. Well, you're so confident in yourself being a blind guide. You're so confident about yourself being a light. You're so confident about being an instructor of the foolish. And the foolish, a fool in the Bible is those who think and behave in ways that are not approved by God, contrary to God, sometimes out of ignorance, sometimes willfully, but a fool anyway, teacher of children. All of this, you have the law. Do you not teach yourself? That's the issue, hypocrisy. We thought about that last week, the hypocrisy that he's bringing up here. So he attacks the people of Israel in the three places that they cherish. Now see, this kind of teaching from the Apostle Paul is what gets him run out of town. It's what gets him lowered in a basket out of a window. It's what gets him beaten. They don't like this kind of teaching here now. You Jews are not really Jews. You're not true Jews. And it's hard for us a little bit to connect with that and relate to it a little bit. We can understand it. But it'd be something like this, if I'd use an example. You take a man, a group of men, women, been born here in the United States of America. Went to school right here in the United States of America. In some cases, they served in the military and went to a distant land under the name of this country. They come back, these men and women, they come and they raise their own family. And they try to teach their children right and wrong and try to educate them and show them, how wonderful this particular country is and the freedoms in this country that we enjoy, that so many have sacrificed for. And in a certain sense, many Americans, all Americans sacrifice to a certain extent, but some certainly more than others in their military service. Beautiful country, landscapes, mountain, sea, river. And here comes the preacher and says to you, brother, you see that guy from Madagascar that's over here? He's more of an American than you are. Oh, no. Now, the person that says that might face some difficulty. Not only that, his family that he's come, that family looks like a more American family than you look like. Now you can already feel, I'm sure, in your emotion, that would not set very well with you. I'm not saying that it should or shouldn't. I'm just trying to draw an example for you. Paul arrives on the scene and says, these Gentiles, when they obey the law, they're more of a Jew than you are. Oh, they would like to kill him for saying that. If they'd like to discount him as a radical, crazy man, but when he's not and he is influential and people start gathering together and forming churches and people are setting down their idols and they're turning from allegiances they once had to the allegiance Paul's preaching, now he's dangerous. So this is the force of what's happening here. And he's going to attack them. He's going to touch on the three areas that they cherish. They are Jews. They're in the line of Abraham. They have a heritage. Yeah, and Paul says, yes, you have a heritage, but your religion is superficial, man. You talk about this, you talk about your heritage, you talk about the temple, you talk about the sacrifice. You're just superficial because you don't obey God. You don't live for God. Certainly not everyone. It was like there were Jews that did, but they didn't do it perfectly. And he's really carving away at some pride in these hearts here. These individuals, they're thinking, well, we're the sons and daughters of Abraham. And in fact, in the New Testament and the teachings of Jesus, Jesus is confronting the religious elite, and they say, we have Abraham as our father. That was their attitude. We have Abraham as our father. Now, Abraham was the father of not only Isaac, Ishmael too, and that's the line of the Arabs today. And they would say today and then, we have Abraham as our father too. But the Jew says, we have a covenant. And you can review that covenant in Genesis chapter 17. When we did our end time series, we did look at it. Abraham shows he has some leanings towards Ishmael, and God said, no. It is through Isaac that my covenant stands. So these Jews, they're saying, we're sons and daughters. We're of Abraham. Through Isaac. Through Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. We are the people who follow Moses. Remember, Jesus says about the teachers, they like to sit in Moses' seat. They're the people who follow Moses. These teachers, they like to sit in Moses' seat, and Jesus tells the folks, you do what they say, but don't do what they do. Ooh, that infuriated them. Because they weren't doing what they saw. They were hypocrites. Same issue the Apostle Paul is dealing with here. We have an ethnicity about us. The kingdom divides. Israel to the north, Judah to the south. After Solomon goes off the scene, King David's off the scene, Solomon's off the scene, the kingdom divides. Israel to the north, Judah to the south, where the word Jew comes from. The word Jew has an ethnic meaning to it, but it also has a geographical meaning to it. People would begin to, the Jews were exiled to Babylon, and they would be referred to as the people that came from Judah. The Jews. But on the return from the exile, everyone that comes, all the Jews, whether they originally were from the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom, all of them were called Jews and referred to as Jews. Well, they have a long history, ethnicity. They have, that legacy of Egypt and the Red Sea parting. They have that legacy. They have the wandering in the wilderness, the crossing of the Jordan, the coming into the promised land. They have the judges, that legacy. They have Saul as their king that comes. They have David as their king that comes. The scriptures come. The prophets speak the word of God. They have Moses, Sinai. The law has come. And you're telling me I'm not a Jew? You can kind of relate, can't you? They have a long ethnic history that they are very proud of. Some today, likely, are very proud of their heritage. It's not wrong to be proud of your heritage, but when you think that's going to get you in right relationship with God rather than Jesus Christ, that becomes a problem. So, he attacks them right off. You call yourself a Jew. You rely on the law. You boast and you know God, because these Gentiles, they don't know God, but we know God. He's worked in our life. You boast that you know God. You know His will. He gave you the scriptures, and you claim you know His will, then why don't you do His will? If you know it. Oh, you're disobedient, and you think you're going to have favor with God. They're beginning to see the picture. You approve of what is excellent because you've been instructed by the law. So he attacks them right at the heart here of who they are as a Jew. When he says, no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, that is amazingly offensive. So he attacks them, secondly, regarding physical marks on their body, circumcision. They have a marking on their body that reminds them. Every day they're reminded. This is who we are. This has been given to Abraham. This covenant has been given. This instruction has been given to Abraham, and it's been passed down from Abraham. This is who we are. We are the select people, and circumcision proves it. Because we come from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. We have the heritage. We also have the markings on our flesh that establish the fact that we are God's people. And you're telling me I'm not a Jew. That's why he has those verses in there on circumcision. Well, you've got it and you think it's going to be of value to you. You think God's going to look at you and you think God's going to give you some credit for that. And it would be of value. If it would be, verse 25, if you obey the law, but you break the law. So since you break the law, you're no better than the uncircumcised Greek. You're no better than a Gentile because you break the law. They don't like that. They've got a way of thinking that's been handed down to them. Verse 26, so if a man who is uncircumcised keeps the precepts of the law, so he's talking about Gentiles here, that those who keep the precepts of the law, God knows he's not circumcised, but wouldn't God recognize him as if he were circumcised, as if someone who loves him, loves God, is willing to obey God as far as he knows anything about God? But you, in verse 27, you have not only your markings, your physical markings, you have not only your heritage, being a Jew, you have the written code, and you don't obey it. They have a false confidence about their standing before God. So the Gentile who keeps the law, God would have favor on them if they did it. Of course, none do, but Paul is setting up an argument here. But here's the Jew who thinks of himself as highly exalted, highly elevated. You are doubly, triply responsible. It's not only your heritage, but you've got this religious right. R-I-T-E, the religious right, the fleshly markings. You've got that, and you have the Scriptures, which the Gentiles do not have, yet they obey God. Who do you think you are, calling yourself a Jew? So he hits all three of these in this particular section. You're probably already ahead of me in your listening guide on number 3. He's a scandalous apostle once again. Remember last week we had scandalous apostle. Well, once again, he's scandalous because he is redefining what it means to be a Jew. So once again, we have to go back with what I said earlier, kind of our study note. He does not hate his people. But he is redefining what it means to be a true Jew in the eyes of God. And he's bringing in an argument, the logic of his argument, such that they can't refute it. They know. Paul can turn to the Scriptures and he can over and over, and they know they're Scriptures. He said, you claim to be a teacher, don't you teach yourself? They know that the Scriptures teach obedience to God, a lifestyle of obedience, honoring God. They know that the Scriptures taught that God's chosen people are to be a light to the world, the nations. God's chosen people are to help the nations who do not know God, help them to understand God. That sounds a lot like the Great Commission in the New Testament, making disciples of all nations. Not a radical position in the New Testament. God's chosen people are to help other people understand the ways of God, how they need to change. They're to be a light and show the nation the goodness, the mercy, the patience of God. They have gotten themselves into a position where, well, we're the preferred people. We're the ones. You remember the story of Jonah? There you go. Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. He's thinking they might get saved. No, I don't think so. I don't want to go there. We are the select people. We're the honorable people. God's chosen us because there's something about us that's really, really unique. And those people over there, well, they're sinners. They deserve to be judged. In fact, they've inflicted a lot of pain on us. They deserve to be judged. Jonah is a good example of that. Paul is saying that there has to be this obedience from the heart. He's urging them to return to the original call. Help people to understand God. Help them to worship in spirit and in truth, and communicate with them the good news of God. So Paul here is destroying these attitudes that the Jews have. They are thinking that their salvation somehow can be transferred through their lineage, can be transferred through participating in a particular religious rite. And Paul says, now, you can't do that. You have to stand on your own. You have to stand on your own and be accountable to God for your own position. And obedience is not optional. So in the context for the apostle, being a true Jew is a matter of the heart. A person who demonstrates in their life the mercy and the spiritual integrity of God, the obedience demanded by God in the Scriptures. There's one difficult phrase that I'll point out to you, and then we'll be finished. He says in verse 21, "You then who teach others, do you not teach yourself? While you preach against stealing, do you steal?" He has this hypothetical argument, is what he has set up. Remember, it's the same from last week. He's continuing this argument. It's as if the apostle, he's having this dialogue, and the Jews, the people, they're looking on the dialogue. You claim to call yourself a Jew, do you? You teach other people, do you? And that's a teaching method in the ancient world. Other people would look on at this conversation with this hypothetical person that he's speaking against, but he's actually speaking against to all of these other people. So he says, you teach against stealing, do you steal? You who say that one must not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? Well, Jesus taught that adultery is a matter of the heart and a matter of the mind, so they'd be guilty on that. But the one that causes a little difficulty here, you who abhor idols, do you rob temples? Well, the best explanation I've heard on that one, it's caused a lot of discussion. What does that mean? Were these Jews in the first century robbing temples? That was not really their practice. They had moved away from idolatry, the blatant idolatry that was in place 1,000 or 1,500 years earlier. There was idolatry for sure, but that was not really the main, that they taught against idolatry. What is happening? It seems to be that there were occasions when the Jews thought they were doing God a favor, and they would destroy a pagan temple. Some factions. And that temple had a lot of items in it, gold, silver, a lot of things in there. They would collect those items and profit from them. Go in, destroy a temple because, God, you're against idolatry. We're helping you out here. We're going to destroy it. But back in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 25, God told the Israelites, when you destroy these people, you don't take their pagan items. You don't take their idolatrous prop. You destroy all of that. Otherwise, you might become an idolater. You destroy it. So it seems like there's just a verse but in Acts, but it seems like that was on the fringes, a practice that goes on. So Paul's drawing on that. He's saying, you teach against idols, and then somebody brings you some profit from an idol, that's okay with you. So he's calling them hypocrites all the way around. And he's destroying their argument. So in the end, the way it stands is that no one can stand before God and everyone is accountable, particularly the Jewish people who have all of these benefits, all of the great benefits that God has given them. And they surely have all the promises that God's given to them. Everlasting covenants with them. All of these great things. Yet they, through their disobedience, are no better than a Gentile. So they too need the gospel. Every human being, big idea. Every human being, no matter where they are, no matter what their background is, their religious upbringing, whatever, they need Jesus. They need the gospel of Jesus. And that's what we'll dig into more in the weeks to come. And that's what we would say here. All of us need Jesus. We need to continue to grow into Jesus. And if you haven't committed to Jesus, you need to do that. Because no one has an excuse when standing before God.